Oh. I always need something to play with whenever I'm doing one of these, so maybe this pen will give me enough amusement. Marker sniffing. Oh, what's happening? I've been distracted lately looking for land, actually. Remember I said, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, memory, Remember I talked about buying a house and fixing it up and flipping it and that kind of thing. And I looked into that and wasn't encouraged by what I found. And to put it mildly, this is not 6 years ago. 6 years ago, when I bought this place, there was a ton of places around that you could get for, I'm not going to say dirt cheap, but they were certainly affordable. Certainly would work with that kind of idea that you could buy it, fix it up, and then sell it at a profit, which I don't think is possible today. The same places that I was seeing then are nearly double what they were. So out of my price range for that type of thing. I mean, it'd be one thing if you can buy a place for, say, $300,000 and then spend, 5-6 months working on it, fixing it up, and then turn around and sell it for, say, 550 or 600,000, but that's not the case. That's simply not going to happen. Instead, I came up with the idea of building a new house, and I recently started looking for a piece of land to do that. Now, I have a specific idea in mind for building a new house, and that would be to build myself a new house. I would build the house for me and move into it, and I would rent this place out. Either rent this place out or sell it. So I've been looking and looking and looking and looking and looking, and in order to pull this off, I need to get the property cheap enough. So, I've been looking within my price range, and I haven't been finding a whole lot, to be honest. This morning I found something that has potential, possibly, but it's just a smaller lot in a location that's less than ideal, and that's the trade-off, If you're going to find something close to here, because land around here, if you can get it, is fairly expensive, and it's out of my price range, basically. So if I'm looking for something that's close to here, it's either going to have some problems with it, or it's going to be in a bad location. And this one is not in a really bad location, but it's not ideal either. In the meantime, I went out and I looked at a couple of sites that had some potential. But when I got there, one in particular was really nice in the thing, because it just showed the front of the lot, and it was I think 4 acres, and it had like 400 feet of frontage, and it went way back. However, the first 20 or 30 feet of the lot is the only usable amount. Everything else slopes up, as in mountain, rock, So I don't know who could buy that. Like, if there weren't restrictions in place, like building code restrictions and all this nonsense that you have to deal with these days, I would buy it because the price was really good. And I guess that's the reason, because it's on the side of a mountain. I would buy it, and I would, all the money that would take to buy the permits and all that stuff for a place like that, you could spend on excavation and do a really good job of building something right on the side of the hill type thing, married right into the bedrock type deal. But with, building codes and all that stuff and development fees and all that, it's just simply not worth it. Unless they're giving the land away. If they were giving the land away, then maybe, but they're not giving it away either. Another place that I went to was, I think, somewhere around 6.5 acres, except about 5 of that was swamp. basically, like wetlands. And the front was built up and built up. The build up looked reasonable to me. Any house that I would build wouldn't have a basement anyway, but I don't know what he filled that property up with, because when you go down over the embankment out behind, you see a lot of car parts and other junk. So there might be a lot of garbage buried there. And, who knows what kind of nonsense you would have to go through to get a permit to build on that stuff. So they might want it all excavated out again and new stuff trucked in. And then you're talking about a lot of money. And then the land wasn't cheap to begin with. I mean, it's a little over 6 acres in a place that's not too remote. Like, you can go up to northern Ontario here and buy 100 acres for like $25,000, but it's really remote. You have to drive for hours on end, and then the roads might not be cleared during the winter. Another thing about some of these locations is they are in unorganized townships, which means that you don't need a building permit to build there. However, you can't build anything in the province of Ontario that legally doesn't conform to the building code. So unless it's really remote and really out of the way, you're running the risk of building something that might have to pass some inspection in the future. So you're better off just to go with the regulations to begin with. The only thing is you save the development fees, which would probably be somewhere, typical for here in Ontario is like $10,000 to $30,000 for building permits. So you save that, but the trade-off there, of course, is that you're living way out. I don't even know if you're getting cell phone reception in some of these places. So yeah, that's what I was thinking about. And then when I, went out and looked at those places and I got discouraged, I said to myself, why are you doing that, John? Why are you once again putting yourself through all of those annoying things when you don't have to? I could stay here and live out my life perfectly fine, Am I bored or something? Is that it? Yeah, I have to admit that I'm a little bit bored with what I've been doing. Seems like the same thing over and over again. It's the reason why I can't remember whether it was last year I talked about buying a house or the year before, because one day basically blends into the next when you're doing this day in and day out. So I wouldn't stop doing this. I would just, be doing that, and I would do a lot of video on it and all that. I would cover the build from beginning to end. I mean, from going out and looking at the land and getting everything set up, right through to, the finishing touches at the very end. But I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence, because as much as I want to do it, I really don't, because it's a lot of hassle, a lot of headache. I love the building part. I love going there and the doing of it. It's everything else that's associated with it that I hate. I absolutely hate. So it kind of turns me off. A couple of years ago, I read Norm Abrams' book where he built a house in Massachusetts, and all the trouble he went through. Like, the book was basically about him building a house, but the majority of it was him talking about the septic system. And any land that you would buy here that I'm looking for would have to have a septic system put in. And then you have to get that, it's not to say, well, put the septic system in over there. You have to get it cited and approved and tests done and all this sort of crap. And there's a section in the very first part of that book that stuck with me. He said that his grandfather, when he built his house, all he had to do was drive 4 stakes in the ground and call for the bulldozer. And the same thing, basically, my neighbor down the street here, he recently died, and he built a log cabin down there. And I was talking to him, stopped in and talked to him for about an hour one day, and he told me about building that and how, he bought the land and basically went out there in his car and met up with the building inspector and drew out on a piece of paper, like an old bill or something that he had in his car, what he wanted to do. And the building inspector, go ahead and call me when this is ready and all that. And he built it. And there's no way, because it's too close to a bit of a stream down there, there's no way that they would allow anybody to build that now. There's too many, environmental protection nonsense in the way. It's almost like, okay, the environment doesn't piss or shit. There's animals around here that piss and shit on the ground right out in the open. So if you put a septic system in that actually properly treats the waste, how is that any worse? Like, if it's not clear by now, I'm very, very free market. I'm very anti-regulation. I think the government should just fuck off and let us do what we want to do. But that's just the way it is, these days. And getting worse. What are you going to do? I've got about, 20 years left here, you could say. My father died when he was around 74. I can't remember exactly. My memory, again, I don't think I'm going to last much longer. So, 20, 21 years, something like that. I've got, how much of it do I want to spend, messing around with more crap? That's just going to end up frustrating me. So these are the things that are in the balance here. A lot of frustration on one side, and on the other side, a place that I actually want to live in is laid out the way I want. It has all the features that I want, would be super efficient, just the right size, all these things, brand new to boot. There wouldn't be anything old in it, which would be awesome. But, weighing it against all the frustration and nonsense that you'd have to go, and not to mention expense, because building a new house anywhere is expensive. So now I've talked about that. What else? I've got plywood here and plywood behind me. These are for the cabinet I need to build for my office to put the printer in and file drawers and all this stuff. And my plan was to start doing that this week. It's going to be something that a lot of people don't have interest in, but it's a project. It's something I have to do. So why not cover it in a build video and a build article? It's kind of an interesting thing. There's going to be some interesting features with the cabinet itself that would make it worth watching, because it's not your typical slap together IKEA type deal. It's going to be well made, well designed, and like I said, some of the features of it make it a little bit unique, I think, anyway.
Lawyers, carpenters, the very minds of the people we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still a part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged. And many of them are so inert, so hopelessly dependent on the system, that they will fight to protect it.